Okay, that's better. So, good evening. It being 5:30 of the clock, I will call this regular council meeting of the town of Fort Frances to order, it being session number 60. We'll begin, as usual, with a territorial acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, the town of Fort Frances acknowledges with respect that it is situated on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Métis people of Treaty 3. We give gratitude and honor to the ancestors, elders, and all Anishinaabe and Métis people for sharing their resources and knowledge with us. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest, and if so, state the general nature thereof? Seeing none. There are no delegations or deputations this evening. We have no presentations this evening. So we'll move to item number 6, which is correspondence. And we have the 2024 Municipal Policing Annual Billing Statement. And before I open the floor up to councillors, I think I'll make a few comments on it myself. I have to say that when I read this, I was shocked. I was shocked to see that for 2025, the estimated cost of policing for the town of Fort Frances was approximately $3.4 million. Cost of policing in 2024 was $2.7 million, and in 2023 was $2.6 million. So we're facing an increase of about $700,000 over last year for this one budget item alone. And I want to emphasize that it's an uncontrollable budget item. We have no control over it. We get the invoice, we pay it. But a $700,000 increase in that one budget item, if we can't find other places to cut, that one item alone could add about 5%, a 5% increase to our taxation. So it's pretty shocking. And just a couple of other statistics. If we look at per capita rates, going back to 2015, the per capita rate was just under $500 a household, about $497 a household. So then in 2023, it was up to $639 a household. But meanwhile, the provincial average per household for all communities served by the OPP was $347 in 2023. So in 2023, our per household per capita was $639. Provincial average was $347. We were paying almost double the provincial average for policing, and that was in 2023. This year, we'll pay $785 per household for policing. And prior to receiving this invoice in previous years, last year, for instance, and this year, 2024, we had the second highest cost per household for policing in the entire province, second only to Kenora. And if we look at the Rainy River District, the town's cost per household is the highest by far. So this is simply not sustainable. The formula for calculating policing costs must change to reflect individual differences in communities, particularly small, rural, northern communities, which do have unique differences. I'd like to point out, and it's in my report, recently our CAO and Councillor Mackey and myself met with representatives of the Solicitor General's office to discuss the cost of policing, because to their credit, they're looking at the funding formula for assessing costs, and they're looking at ways in which perhaps there could be reductions in certain circumstances. So we pointed out to them that this one-size-fits-all formula that often they come up with in Toronto simply doesn't work for small northern rural communities which have their own unique problems. And there has to be changes made to that formula, and there have to be discounts available for unique situations in the north. Or the OPP is simply going to price themselves out of the market. So councillors, having heard my diatribe, does anybody have any other comments? Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd like to agree with everything you said about the costing. It's outrageous. But I would like to ask that council ask the OPP to send somebody here to come and explain this to not just us, but to this community as to why a 25% increase in costs is about to happen and we don't have a say. So I think they need to come and explain to us. Thank you.
Yeah, very good point. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Bernetta?
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree as well that the costs have gotten just unmanageable for our community. I know at the Roma or AMO conference, we did do a delegation with the Solicitor General. We spoke about the formula with them. They seemed to be receptive to some of the points we put forward. I also am really happy to hear that you've also had follow-up meetings, and I'm aware that the Dryden CAO and Mayor also met with the Solicitor General around their funding or their billing, and did get some results. So I'm hopeful that if we stay on this track and continue to bring it forward, that we'll see something happen.
Thank you, Councillor Bernetta. To Councillor Mackey's point, your point was, I think the clerk read your mind, was taken up by the clerk when we got this, and she has already contacted them about sending people, because in the past they have sent people, and I find it quite odd when we get such an outrageous increase that they don't send one. It also makes me think that they're kind of dodging us. So we will follow up on that. Anything else? Okay. Moving on, council reports. I'll quickly make a few items. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my bad. We have a drug safety partner initiative. We got a letter from the Legion, and Councillor Bernetta asked to speak to this. So Councillor Bernetta, I'll go to you.
Thank you. When this came forward in our correspondence, I thought it was important that we discuss it, primarily because of the fact that we are dealing with many social issues around addiction. And I think prevention is a really key component of addressing these issues. So I would like to support this project from Council's budget and put forward, I think, what we did the last time they asked. I'd like to recommend that we do the same.
Okay, I'm just going to check with the treasurer because we're getting close to the end of our budget year. I'm not sure how much we have left in council's discretionary budget. Would we be able to afford that, Madam Treasurer? I think it's about $500 is what we gave last time.
Likely, but I can look it up if you give me a minute.
Oh, okay, and then would it be possible, I guess, to bring a recommendation to the next meeting? Yes. So I'll put a recommendation on the floor that council directs administration to bring a recommendation on contributing what we contributed in the past on this particular item. Can I get a mover and seconder on that recommendation? Councillor Bernetta, Councillor Firth. Anyone like to speak to that? All in favor? That's carried. And so we'll have a recommendation at the next meeting. Thank you for that, Councillor Bernetta. It is a good cause, and I agree completely with you. Okay, back to 7.1. I attended the DSAB board meeting on September 19th. DSAB is wrestling with a crisis. We're having several crises in healthcare in our community, but the DSAB in particular is having a crisis with paramedics. The DSAB requires a minimum of 46 full-time paramedics to offer comprehensive, continual service that they have always offered across the district. And right now we are down to 32 full-time equivalent paramedics. And so the DSAB is facing that. They've had to make some drastic changes for two reasons. One is they need to protect the paramedics that we have. We're trying to retain them as well as recruit new paramedics. And so there has to be changes to their schedules. We have some paramedics who have so much overtime and they haven't been able to take holidays. They haven't been able to spend time with their family, and it's causing a lot of stress. So the DSAB is looking at changing up the paramedicine service across the district. And the other thing, of course, they want to do is, even though we have a much fewer number of paramedics than we need, we still want to make sure that we have safe ambulance service across the entire district. And so that required some changes, and that's what's going on right now. I'll also point out that we're also short of early childhood educators. And so we're having trouble with some of our early childhood education programs and keeping them open. We had a couple of flag raisings in the past month. On September 23rd, we raised the reconciliation flag here at Fort Frances, and we followed that up with a ceremony and a barbecue. I also at that time issued a proclamation where I committed the town of Fort Frances to strive and to commit to being a town of reconciliation and to creating long-term systemic change and new relationships based on mutual understanding and respect. We had a really good attendance at that flag raising. It was good to see. I want to thank all the councillors who came out and the councillors, of course, who helped cook for the barbecue. I want to thank our CAO for arranging for that barbecue and also for the clerk's office for arranging for a lot of the stuff that went on there. It was a really good outing. It seems to get better every year. And talking about flag raisings, we also on September 25th raised the Franco-Ontario flag. September 25th is the Franco-Ontario Day. It celebrates hundreds of years of French culture in Ontario. Ontario has more than 745,000 Francophones. It's the largest Francophone community outside of Quebec. And as usual, I read a proclamation in English, and this year we also had our clerk read the proclamation in French. And we're hoping next year to expand it a little bit and get some of the French immersion students out for that event. I want to congratulate the Fort Frances Power Corporation. They've worked 250,000 safe hours without any accidents, and they will be holding some recognition for their employees, issuing their employees a gift, a commemorative item, and have a luncheon. The other thing I really want to point out is you can't have help but see around town all the banners of our veterans up on the light standards. And the Fort Frances Power Corporation does that with the Royal Canadian Legion. They do that free of charge, and they've donated the hardware to put those banners in place. So again, I want to recognize the Fort Frances Power Corporation and their employees for doing that. Rainier River District Services Board is in the process of creating a new strategic plan. So the board chair and myself, I being the vice chair, sat down and had individual consultations with the consultants. We also had consultation with the staff, consultation with the board, and now it's open to other stakeholders. And so I believe all of the councillors should have got an email inviting them to take part and give some input into the Rainier River District Services Board. So I see some people who said they've already done that, so that's wonderful, but I encourage you to do that. I'm just going to speak briefly to this because I assume Councillor McTaggart will speak to it. But the Police Detachment Board had its inaugural meeting, and the only reason I want to speak to it is I want to congratulate Councillor McTaggart. He was elected as the first chair, the new chair of the committee. And I also want to thank him sincerely and deeply because it's John's initiative and John's work and John's dedication that really went a long way to ensuring that we got this off the ground so quickly. And the other person I want to thank is our clerk and the clerk's office for doing all of the groundwork and getting all of the administrative stuff up and running. And that's all I'll say about that particular meeting. September 30th, of course, was the Reconciliation Awareness Walk, which started at the Point. and went down to 7 gens. It was really well attended. I think most of the school students in the Rain River District attended. Everybody was wearing orange. There was a sea of orange. It was great to see. Luncheon was provided after the walk, and there was a powwow. And the rest of my report you can read. It's there. With that, I'll go to Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship. On September 17th, I attended the museum meeting, and at that meeting, we were introduced to Lisa Hughes, who is the new museum curator, and Katrina Kara, who is the programs and events coordinator. So we're excited to have both of them on board, and we're looking for great things at the museum with these positions now being filled. The committee reviewed the strat plan update, the committee, excuse me, committee bylaw review, and the member recruitment for the committee as we continue to have vacancies on that particular committee. The hours to the end of excuse me, to the end of October are 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Thursday through Sunday. And currently there is a display that is a retrospective of Peter Spuzak's artwork, and it's on display till December 13th, and I encourage you to stop by and take a look at it. Numbers through the museum from January 1st to October 31st were 3,162. So it's been some good traffic. And our next meeting is October 22nd. On September 18th, I attended the Sister Betty Kennedy Advisory Committee, and the committee reviewed the committee bylaws, the seniors month final report, the report on the volunteer dinner, and outstanding citizen of the year, which for this year was Irene Lang, which I believe I previously had reported, and the letter to council regarding the Victoria Avenue parking. Starting on Wednesdays, as of October 2nd, there will be a time set aside in the afternoons for women to come out and play pool. Exercise classes and bingos are back up and running for the fall session. And if you want more up-to-date information, please sign up for the monthly newsletter that comes out of the center. On September 21st, there was a dinner event that was held, and I believe Councillor Behan reported on this at the last meeting, to honor Les Baker and Cynthia Woodland for their success in medaling at the recent summer games in Quebec City, seniors games in Quebec City. It was a great evening, with greetings being brought to the group by Deputy Mayor Behan. The next meeting is actually tomorrow. On September 25th, Mayor Halikas and myself attended the inaugural meeting of the Rainy River Board 1 of the OPP Detachment Board. All members were sworn in with oaths and affirmation. The elections were held, and I was very honored to be nominated and elected as chair. The vice chair is Gary Rogozinski. And the members are Luke Kempf, councillor for Dawson, who was appointed by the 5 communities of Chapel, Morley, Lake of the Woods, Dawson, and Rainy River, and Sean Spence, councillor for Alberton, who was appointed on behalf of Alberton, La Valley, and Emo. Gary Rogozinski is a provincial appointee, and Andrew Halikas and myself are Fort Francis Council appointees. Chelsea Gregg was appointed board administrator, and Don Galusha appointed as treasurer. The codes of conduct were reviewed and accepted. This has been a long and difficult path to get to this point, and I want to acknowledge the hard work of our clerk, Gabrielle Lecuyer, and deputy clerk, Chelsea Gregg, and also Travis Robb, who advocated for this in his position as acting CAO. This is only the beginning of the formation of the detachment board. It's really a build from the ground up. And it's going to take some time and some real commitment. We continue to look for 2 community appointments, one from the West End and one from Fort Francis. And there is training to be completed, policies and budgets to be created, and there's lots to do. This is 9 communities working together to be sure that we have the best policing possible for our citizens. So please stay tuned. as the board evolves and grows in the months ahead. The next meeting is next Monday, the 21st. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor McTaggart, and I believe there were no other reports. So we'll move on to item 8, which is the consent agenda, and we have 10 items. So starting at 8.2, which is the meeting minutes of September 23rd of regular council. Recommendation reads, the council approve the regular council meeting and the 2025 budget public meeting minutes of September 23rd, 2024, and that they be approved as presented. 8.3 deals with board and committee meeting minutes, and the recommendation reads that the boards and committee meeting minutes be received as information, and they are the Fort Frances Library Board minutes of June 27, 2024, and the BIA minutes of September 11, 2024. 8.4 is the POA quarterly financial reports. Recommendation reads that the council receive report AR-24-0681 as information on the POA financial statements for the period ending June 30th, 2024. 8.5 are financial statements for the month ending September 30th, 2024, and the recommendation reads, the council receive report AR-24-0680 being the financial statements for the general fund and water and sewer funds for the period ending September 30th, 2024 as information. 8.6 are capital fund financial statements, and the recommendation reads that council receive report AR-24-0682 being the capital fund financial statements for the period ending September 30th, 2024 as information. 8.7 is award of tender 2024-OF-11, and the recommendation reads that council receive report AR-24-0677 with administration's recommendation to enter into an agreement with 1003567 Ontario Limited, aka Benka Electronic, for a total tender price of $224,759.69, excluding HST, or $228,715.46, including the town's portion of HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the corporation and prepare a bylaw as required. 8.8 is the Drinking Water Systems Monthly Report. Recommendation reads that approval of report AR-24-0688 agree with the recommendation of administration that the May through September 2024 water system monthly summary reports be accepted by council prior to being made available to the general public. 8.9 is the Fort Frances Wastewater Treatment Facility Report, and recommendation is the council receive report AR-24-0687 as information. 8.10, this is the Summer Ice Pilot Project Evaluation, and the recommendation reads that council receive report AR-24-0663, Summer Ice Pilot Program Evaluation, as information as requested at the April 22nd, 2024 regular meeting of council. It's Resolution 504. And the council direct administration to continue the pilot project for an additional season in the summer of 2025, with summer ice commencing July 8th, 2025 through to August 31st, 2025. And that council direct administration to bring a report to council in October 2025 to evaluate the continued success of the project. And finally, 8.11, this is the Connecting Links Program application, and the recommendation reads that council approve report number AR-24-0678, and that a resolution of support be passed for application to the 2025-2026 Connecting Links programs for the reconstruction of Scott Street, that's Highway 11, between Mosier Avenue and Armand Avenue, which will state, 1, council support of the project identified in the application, 2, confirmation that capital funding is available for the municipal contribution component, and 3, indication that if the application is successful, the municipality will proceed with the project in accordance with the timelines specified in the application. Councillors, would you like to pull anything? Councillor Bernetta?
810, please.
Okay. Anything else? Councillor Mackey?
8.7.
8.7. Anything else? Councillor Bien?
Thank you. 8.11.
8.11. Anything else? Okay, going to 8.7. Councillor Mackey?
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is, so in 2016, when we purchased this device, it did not come with a load bank, and so it was not, we purchased it, without a load bank. Should we have tendered it with, or did it come, the tender did come with that requirement, but it wasn't fulfilled?
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. So in 2016, when we purchased the unit and installed it, we never contemplated needing a load bank. However, after a few years of operating, a couple of things became apparent. Number one, in order to meet CSA standards to be classified as an emergency standby generator, it has to be sized to operate the entire plant at its maximum load. Our water plant barely runs at a quarter of its rated capacity on any given day. So if we do run the plant on full generator for its monthly tests, we are really not using enough of the generator to put it under load to properly run it. Secondarily to that, when we do our monthly tests, if we do run it on full plant load, it causes us a whole pile of grief in the plant. So the guys at the plant only run it on plant load every other month. And so what we were seeing is that we were not running the motor hard enough to bring up the operating temperatures. So we were starting to get into mechanical issues with it because even under plant load, we're not putting enough load on it. So with all of that in mind, we went out and secured engineering to develop and specify what type of load bank we needed to have to address that component of this this piece of equipment.
Thank you, Manager Rob. Any further questions on that? Yes, go ahead.
So to your point, the way you are currently doing it every second month, putting the load of the plant actually on this unit can possibly cause some catastrophic problems. I'm asking, it's not a statement. I'm wondering, I'm just wondering how important this is. If we don't get it right away, something really serious can happen, and usually serious is quite expensive.
Manager Rob.
So if we do run it on plant load, it causes us operational issues in the plant, which it's better than not having a generator. Let's be very clear on that. But the bigger issue is that it's still not enough load to work the engine hard enough in the generator to get the exhaust gas temperatures high enough to ensure that we're not fouling exhaust filters and all of the other components within it. So there's kind of two issues here. The issue is that when we run the plant, the generator and the plant load, we're causing problems in the plant. But we're not necessarily solving the problems in the generator either. So load bank will bring in that stationary load to make sure that we're running it hard enough for the 1 month tests so that we're not causing ourselves operational problems with the generator components down the road.
Okay. Thank you, Manager Rob. 8.10, was that Councillor Bernetta? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Manager Young. I'm just trying to do the math here a little bit, so I'm hoping you can clarify for me. So your report indicates that we actually saw a surplus of $9,251.37 running the summer ice program. But you did break out separately the power costs for those 3 months, which were actually $16,855.81. So does your profit of $9,000 account for that extra power cost?
Manager Young.
Thank you, through the chair, to Councillor Bernetta. Yes, so when we look at our expenses broken down, we have the variance out of what was actual from what was budgeted. And when we look at the summary of our total revenue of 46,475 at the end of page 3, and our total expense of 37,223. That gives us that variance of 9,251. So the first table of the expenses is looking at our budgeted costs versus our actual costs. So we were underspent on what we budgeted for electric, overspent on labor, almost equal for water and sewer, and then way under budget on our anticipated additional costs. So then the summary report takes those final numbers for the mathing.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McTaggart?
Thank you, Worship, through you to Mr. Young. Thank you for this report. I'm really excited to see it. I could see the opportunities as we approve this use of the arena in the summer, and I hope to see it grow. And I'm very pleased to see that if we approve this tonight, you're going to have the opportunity now to go out early and talk to groups and that. But will you go outside of the area looking for hockey schools and tournaments and that kind of thing to develop, to bring people to town in future years?
Go ahead, Manager Young.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor McTaggart. Yes, so with the additional time that we have, we'll have a better opportunity to market to external groups to come in and use the ice.
Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the chair, Mr. Young. Just kidding. No, I anticipated this project being a huge success. So kind of reading this, it's no surprise that we made a little bit of money, and I was much appreciative that I had my child doing something in the summer that he loves. So having that there was incredibly wonderful. I do have two questions though, because I think that, and you may have already done this homework, I don't know. My first question though is if you've approached Couchiching to ensure that they are not looking at also running competitive ice time next summer, because that's always a variable that can impact our pilot project and change this significantly. And then I think it ties into the current state we're at right now with the 52, which is the wear and tear. And I know you had a statement in here, which I appreciated, that said, you know, as such, continued monitoring and evaluation of maintenance schedules and replacement needs will be crucial if summer ice becomes a regular service. So for this part, I just had two other questions. The first question was, are we looking at like jumping back and forth each summer between IFK and 52 to kind of balance that pressure, that load? And then my second question was, like, how do we monitor that? Like, how is it actually monitored? Thank you.
Andrew Young.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Olson. So I have not reached out to neighboring rinks at this time to see if they're planning on doing a summer ice project, and I can definitely do that and report back to council if council wishes. In regards to the IFK versus the 52 arena will not support summer ice based on the construction of that building, and Manager Rob might be able to fill in a little bit more of the reasons why, but the IFK is the only ice surface that would support summer ice based on humidity and temperatures that we expect in the summer. And then maybe I'll defer to Manager Rob to talk about how we monitor the life of a generator.
Go ahead, Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. So yeah, just on the 52 side of things, to Manager Young's point, 52 absolutely cannot handle summer ice. The ice pad is not insulated underneath of it, and the building envelope is also not insulated to help keep that cold in. The ice plant is just simply undersized to try and tackle the ambient hot temperatures. On the Ice for Kids side of things, in terms of monitoring the life cycle, we do have a maintenance contract with Simcoe Refrigeration. They look at all things ice plant all the time for us. We do regular check-ins with them. They do a mandatory pre-start, mid-season, and shutdown analysis of all of our ice plants. However, all that being said, the compressor issues we ran into this year at 52, no one saw those coming. Yes, it was an old piece of equipment, but yes, we had been doing regular rebuilds on it. We've been doing all the kind of typical life cycle things we had anticipated needing to do there on regular hourly, based on runtime, hourly work. That will happen in Ice for Kids as well. However, running Ice for Kids in the summer, making summer ice, is not the same as running Ice for Kids in the winter, making winter ice. The plants, there's more runtime on them, and it's a lot harder runtime on them than it is in the wintertime. So the opportunity for an unexpected compressor failure, way higher when you start running them in the summertime than it is if you're just running them in the wintertime. And as we found with 52, sometimes we don't see that coming.
Thank you, managers. Follow up?
Sorry, I want to just make sure. So I'm assuming before this report came forward that there was an assessment done more recently after this summer use, and things are okay going into this winter.
Somebody.
I'll take that. So yes, we had Simcoe, as we always do, come in at the end of the season. They do a end of season for us, and then they also did a pre-start. And I mean, obviously they've been here for a good portion of our summer working on 52. So if the guys did encounter anything, we had techs right on site. We do, at this point in time, everything looks fine with Ice for Kids. We do have a motor with some sort of vibration that we cannot necessarily pinpoint, but we have a spare motor freshly rebuilt on site in the event that we do need to change it out. So there's a lot of moving components on an ice plant. There's a lot of valves and there's a ton in these. But Simcoe, it is a Simcoe plant. They know exactly what is on site. A lot of what we have on site is stock items. So if we did run into a small problem through the winter, we'd be able to address it.
Great.
Thank you for that, manager. Did I see your hand up? Okay. So just before we go on, I do want to congratulate Manager Young on a successful program. Those are some good numbers. We don't always get good numbers. So thank you for your work, and I look forward to continuing it. Item 8.11, Councillor Bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I see this report's from Cody. I don't see him online, but so maybe I'll ask this to Manager Rob. I'm certainly all in favor of this. I think it's important that we fix up Scott Street as we go along. I guess my question is, given that the stretch from Reed to Moser, I'm not mistaken, was supposed to be done this year, has been delayed to next year. We're looking for, if approved, we'd be something we do in 2026 as opposed to next year, or is it something we can do all at once? Thank you.
Manager Rob.
Thank you through the chair. The plan, if successful in getting the funding at a reasonable time, would be that in 2026 or 2025, we would be constructing all of that stretch of Scott Street.
Thank you for that, Manager Rob. Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, I have a recommendation. The council approve the consent agenda as following, being items 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.8, and 8.9. Could I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor McTaggart and Councillor Mackey. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Okay, and going back to the three that were pulled. I have a resolution that says that council approve report AR-24-0677 with administration's recommendation to enter into an agreement with 100003567 Ontario Limited, aka Benka Electric, for a total tender price of $224,759.69, excluding HST, or $228,715.46, including the town's portion of HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute the agreement on behalf of the corporation and prepare a bylaw as required. Could I get a mover and seconder, Councillor Mackey and Councillor Bernetta? Any further discussion on this one? All in favor? It's carried. Nobody is opposed. And again, we have recommendation that council receive report AR-24-0663. This is the summer ice program evaluation as information as requested at the April 22nd, 2024 regular meeting of council, being resolution 504. And that council direct administration to continue the project for an additional season in the summer of 2025, with summer ice commencing July 8, 2025 through to August 31st, 2025. And the council direct administration to bring a report to council in October 2025 to evaluate the continued success of the project. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Firth and Councillor Behan. Any further discussion on this one? All in favor? Oh, sorry. Councillor Olson.
No, I'm just hoping that administration can just follow up with Kuching just to make sure that they have no anticipated ice schedule for next summer.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councillor Firth.
I just wanted to make sure that we could be communicated with the progress throughout the sales over the next couple of months, just to have some indicator points. I know it's kind of in the report, but just for information so we can see how things are going.
Go ahead.
Just seeking clarification. So sales would be opening up in January of 2025.
Yeah,
So
so
would we
it'll be
like to see a report come in March?
Thanks.
Okay. Everyone good? Calling the question. All. So I'll just do the motion I read. Okay. Okay, so on the motion that I just read, which doesn't have the instructions on reporting, all in favor? That's carried. No one was opposed. So just to clarify, Councillor Firth, you wanted a report in March on sales?
Yeah, sales progress, yeah, by March.
Okay, so a new resolution attached to this one, which is council directs administration to bring back a report in March on sales progress, and that's moved by Councillor Firth. I need a seconder. Councillor Olson. Any further discussion? Councillor Behan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Manager Young. Would you still be looking at a minimum of was it 291 that was the minimum that we were trying to attain? Is that what we're going to try again for this coming season? Thank you.
Go ahead, Manager Young.
Thank you through the chair. The goal would be that we see this continue as a cost recovery or a revenue generating project. So that would come out in the October 2025 review of the summer to see if we're going to make this a regular base level of service, or if we're going to continue on a year, or if we're going to end the project. We can put that in as a goal for our March sales report. But I guess that report would be indicating the success that we've seen in selling the ice up to that point, and then council would be able to make the decision from there.
Councillor Behan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess what I'm trying to get at, Manager Young, is that will we still have a minimum threshold to meet before to go ahead, or if we don't meet that, we would not go ahead? Thank you.
Manager Young.
The minimum threshold for that cost recovery would be that 291 hours. So yes, that would be our target.
Any further discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That's carried. And no one was opposed. Okay, moving on. 9.2, I'll put a recommendation on the floor. Oops, sorry. I had one more connecting links one from council. That was 8.11. So we have a resolution that council approve report number AR-24-0678, and that a resolution of support be passed for application to the 2025 Connecting Links program for the reconstruction of Scott Street, which is Highway 11, between Mosier Avenue and Armand Avenue, which will state three things. One, council's report of the project identified in the application. Two, confirmation that capital funding is available for the municipal contribution component. And three, indication that if the application is successful, the municipality will proceed with the project in accordance with the timelines specified in the application. Could I get a mover and seconder on that, please? Councillor Bien, Councillor McTaggart. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Gets carried. No one is opposed. Okay, moving on to 9.2, which is the renewal of municipal insurance. Oops, sorry, 9.1. Getting a little mixed up here with all of these amendments. 9.1 deals with the Consumer Price Index, and I'll put a resolution on the floor. The council received report AR-24-0679 and approve administration to use the Ontario CPI of 2.1% for the increase to user fees for 2025. So a mover and a seconder, please, to get that on the floor. Councillor Firth, Councillor Bernetta. Any discussion? Oh, thought there would be. Oh, Councillor Bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I've seen, again, before we talked about doing it excluding food, and I see this time all items excluding food is exactly the same as all items. So it seems like 2.1 is what we should be going with. So I'm surprised it worked out that way, but I'm good with the 2.1. Thank you.
So to your point, if you look at the cost of housing, which is 5.5% in there, and then if you look at the line that says including all but the cost of housing, it's 1%. And so the question you have to ask yourself is housing affecting the cost of our user fees? So I just put that out for discussion and to roil the waters a little. So you might want to consider 1% instead of 2.1. So any thoughts? Councillor Bien?
I think that's an excellent point, Mr. Mayor, and I'd be curious if to find out from administration just what the shelter cost factors into our CPI. Again, I don't know how it would, but it sounds to me like it's a logical.
Is there anyone in administration that wants to tackle that? It's kind of a difficult thing to tackle on the spur of the moment, but I don't see how housing affects our user fees. Councillor Bernetta?
I'm thinking that it depends on how you look at it. So if you're looking at it from somebody who owns a home, then obviously housing is a factor. We own buildings, which is not unlike owning a home. We have expenses related to those facilities that we own. So I would suggest that we have housing or building issues as well. So I would think that wouldn't be a fair comparison to remove it.
You make a valid point. Anyone else? So the resolution on the floor is that we use the CPI, Ontario CPI of 2.1% for the increase to Ontario user fees. Further discussions? Then I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries. Okay, 9.3. Oops, 9.2. Get that insurance one yet. This is the renewal of the municipal insurance. Again, it's another shocker. So the recommendation reads that the Council of the Town of Fort Frances approve report AR-24-0686 to accept the renewal offer received from Intact Public Entities, IPE, in the amount of $441,369 plus applicable taxes for municipal insurance for the 2024 term. And further that, an authorizing bylaw be prepared authorizing mayor and clerk to execute the agreement on behalf of the corporation. So I need a mover and seconder to get that on the floor. Councillor Olson, Councillor Bien. Any discussion or comments? Yes, Counselor Mackey, and then I'll go to Counselor McTaggart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my question is simply, is there an opportunity to form or get involved in a buyer's group with other municipalities? And if so, would that possibly bring everybody's insurance rates down if you're in a group purchasing plan?
Anybody from admin want to tackle that? Treasurer Galusha.
Thank you. We've been talking with several groups for several months, I'll say, but nothing has come to any fruition. So at this point, we need to renew for November 1st. So this was our best option for this year, in my opinion.
But following up on what Councillor Mackey said, this is something that we could look at in the future because, again, this is a 14% increase. It's another uncontrollable expense, and it's going to make it very difficult if it continues into the future. So I'm hearing that we'll keep looking into this. Councillor McTaggart?
Thank you, Your Worship. Under the options and analysis, there's a suggestion that we could increase our deductibility on both property and liability deductible. Could I have administration's thoughts on that, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor McTaggart. So the only one that I can really comment on was the property deductible. So the renewal offer already has an increased property deductible this year from 10 to 15,000. The question that I asked, basically, IP basically has like a kind of a standard that they use, and municipalities around our size are usually 25,000. So the information that I received was that if we were to increase, it's unlikely that we'd be able to decrease it in the future. So that would be the disadvantage. And they didn't recommend it. But if we wanted to do the savings, then that is an option.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, then I'll call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? It's carried. 9.3. This is an important one coming from the clerk. I'll put the resolution on the floor. The council received report AR-24-0667 for the purpose of reviewing the committee bylaw, and the council directed administration to bring forward recommendations that clarify the roles and authority of advisory committees, including but not limited to management of revenue, expenses, and donations, oversight of day-to-day operations, direction of staff, formation of subcommittees, and that council direct administration to develop and present a policy governing donations and in-kind support from staff, and further that council direct administration to develop and present a policy for implementing a public appointment process. So can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Olson and Councillor Bernetta. Okay, councillors, input, questions, comments. Councillor Olson.
So I'm just under the assumption that all of council had the opportunity to read this, but I'm actually hoping tonight that we could have a robust conversation around this policy because I really struggled with it. I just want to say that I appreciate the recommendations that the clerk did bring forward, because those were a lot of the concerns that I had in this particular policy. And then I think I might have to ask for an amendment to one of the and that's to reflect Indigenous best practice too, for governing donations and in-kind support. So I don't know where you'd like to start tonight, Mayor, but.
So let's start with that. I think probably the best way to go about it is to separate out the policy governing donations and in-kind support and make that a separate policy. Are you okay with that? Does that deal with your issue? And I talked to the clerk about it. She's okay with that as well. Separate motion. So I'm going to stroke the, and that council direct administration to develop and present a policy governing donations and in-kind support. That takes that out of this motion, and we'll have a separate motion for that. Okay, so the motion before you now has been reduced. The other thing I think I'll mention here is the clerk is concerned that we haven't really received input from some of the existing committees. And we know that some of the existing committees had some concerns. So I'm just wondering if any of the councillors here have input from existing committees that they would like to input now. Yes, Councillor Bernetta?
I guess it's more of a question, but the physician recruitment committee has its own set of sort of bylaws, or no, it's not, terms of reference. And so I'm wondering, how does that, how do we do that? Like, does it come to the town, or do we just send a copy?
I don't think that's a committee of council, is it? So,
Oh, it's not?
yeah.
Okay,
So
okay,
we're not worried about it.
okay, thanks.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Behan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So I'm just making sure I'm clear in my mind. The advisory committees we're looking at are basically three of them: Sister Kennedy Center, the museum, and the Indigenous Relations one. And these two would be what would here, I would say, most apply to the Sister Kennedy Center and the museum. So we're looking at those.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So now wanting to put in Councillor Olson?
Sorry, Mayor. I just want to make it clear, though, too, that this hasn't had an opportunity to go to Indigenous Relations yet for their feedback.
No.
We haven't met yet. So
No.
I don't want to speak on behalf of Indigenous Relations. However, I did have some concerns of my own when I was reading through the policy itself. So I don't know if we need more time to be able to bring this back to the committee so that we can have fair input into this.
Well, let's get your input right now. We've got two of the other committee members here. So do you want to give your input right now? Yeah, let's do it. We'll be getting input on the Indigenous Committee right now. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first thing that I noticed between Indigenous Relations and our two other standing committees under council is language. So there was a difference in language that was used between the three particular communities. Some were addressed as members, some were citizens, some were community members, and that was really important to me. The other language that we had in the Standing Committee for Indigenous Relations specifically was the word Aboriginal. And we're redefining that now, I think, in the place that we're in as a community, which is Indigenous. Yes. But most communities are presenting this with an asterisk so people are clear on what that means. So are we speaking as, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people? Are we speaking just for First Nations and Métis people at that table? I don't know where we stand, but typically there's an asterisk connected to it. So there's clarity on what Indigenous people we're speaking of, so that we're not speaking of Dene and Cree and, all the others.
Okay, so before we go on, that's a change you'd like to make?
That's what I'm asking as a recommendation.
Yes.
Your worship, the draft that I did put on there, I had already made that change.
Okay, great.
Within it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, carry on.
I have a whole list. So, composition was another question, I guess, or concern that I had on the table. So again, there was language. And then I did reflect on this a lot and really sat in that place of who is necessary for this committee. And are we bombarding community members when we're top heavy on leadership or governance side of it? Does it feel like there's a power differential? And so my question, I put in here that I seen it as very top heavy in leadership. And I thought, well, who would be best? And that's why I wanted to put it to council of who we seen would be best suitable at that table, and what their particular role would be. So that was one piece of that particular committee. So I don't know if you want to start with that.
Yeah,
or
let's
maybe
start with
through
that.
the
So
list.
you're suggesting that, and I agree with you, I think it is top heavy with counselors. So you're suggesting that we add additional community members?
Either additional community members or pull some of us off the table. I don't know which direction council would like to go. I don't know that it's necessary that, and I'm just speaking from the last minute, there was the CEO, the mayor, myself, Councillor Behan also there, and then 2 community representatives. And then there was a commentary, which I appreciated too, because it really kind of moved me to reflecting, was rec. Should rec and culture be at that table so they can carry out some of the day-to-day doings? But that's 5 of us and 2 community members. And I don't know on this particular community or committee if we want to open it up and make it a large committee, or in the meantime, while we're trying to figure out our groundings, pull back on the leadership side a little bit and create that safety and then introduce others to that space.
So my thoughts, and anyone else can weigh in, are we don't want the committee to be too unwieldy. I would suggest that we add an additional community member and subtract a counselor.
Fair.
What's everyone else's thoughts? I'm seeing some nods and some nods and the odd stone face. So unless council tells me otherwise, I'm going to suggest to the clerk that we remove a counselor and add an additional community member. Councilor Behan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question would be, what community member we add, because we have one from the Métis, representing the Métis, we have one representing Indigenous peoples. Who would be the third that we?
Could be a community member at large. And don't forget, I think also we have, we want a youth rep.
We want a youth one as well.
Yeah.
Do we have to, sorry, can I ask the clerk this? Do we have to distinguish? Can we just put community member? And if it's a youth that comes to the table, it can be just anyone?
Yep.
I think
Yeah,
that's fair.
let's keep it flexible,
Yeah.
because we have a hard enough time as it is with getting people on committees. Okay, so that was good.
Cool. Okay, there's one.
Carry on.
Already talked about language change, remuneration. And this was something that was really important to me, that the Indigenous Relations Committee's standing practice looks different than any other committee, which is we utilize our SEMA, we pass our tobacco every meeting, and then we offered a gift for those that sit at the table. And I think that's something that should be reflected in the committee, should there be changeover or whatever, that standardized safe practice is embedded into what we're doing at that table. So
you want to
I would
embed the idea of giving out tobacco.
yeah, and an acknowledgement in that particular committee that that is how we create that space, and it's a different practice than any other committee.
I agree, and that is the practice we've been following since its inception. So
Yeah.
we want to embed the idea that we will be giving out tobacco at every meeting. Yeah, I'm just assuming you're good with it unless you tell me otherwise.
Just holler.
Okay, Councilor Fur.
Besides SAM, are you also talking about remuneration and like traditional gifts as well upon exit and entrances, or are you just talking SAMA? Because I just want to make sure the
No,
clerk.
both.
Okay, make sure that the clerk
Tobacco
has.
and gifts.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. And I think we did
We did.
something small from the municipality, which was wonderful.
We did a little medicine pouch.
Yeah.
Okay.
1.2, my suggestion was to minimize, not eliminate, as much as I think it would be great that I can't remember what the wording was. Maybe eliminating barriers, I want to say, but I think the intent of the committee is to minimize them, knowing that we can't take every barrier away. So that was my suggestion.
Yes.
I did make that change. Kind of go through it down below.
Oh,
so
perfect.
I did.
I'm going off
It
my
was-
email.
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
That's good. I did, as you sent that email, you did touch on some things, and so I assumed that there would be no controversy around the table with those. So if you look at the policy, there's some changes.
I'll just
in there.
pause for a minute here. I think Councillor Bien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, while I appreciate Councillor Olson's opinions here and input, I like the elimination rather than minimize, because I think our goal is to eliminate the barriers, not to just minimize them. That's my thought. I think the word elimination actually is better than minimize, to my mind. Thank you.
So, councillors, what do the rest of you think? Councillor Bernetta?
I think when you use words like eliminate, it's a standard that you're setting. So and in some cases, it may be impossible to eliminate a particular barrier. So I prefer the minimize or eliminate where possible, to at least say that you're going to work toward elimination, as opposed to saying we absolutely will minimize or eliminate. So
You're suggesting eliminate where possible?
yeah, I think that's better than, yeah, it just gives you some ability to minimize or to work toward the elimination.
Councillor Olson, are you okay with eliminate where possible?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
eliminate where possible.
recognizing
Okay, back to you, Councillor Olson.
Did everybody read my commentary? I feel
Yes.
like I'm just going through
Yep.
this. I did have a standing point around reconciliation, because I think that was one of the kind of targets of Indigenous Relations Committee.
It absolutely is.
And I struggle with that, because I think, as I understand it, reconciliation should be embedded into all that we do. And I guess when I envisioned sitting on this particular committee, I seen our role as influencing all policies in making sure that they're safe, equitable.
That's the intent. This is an advisor committee, and one of its prerogatives is to advise the municipality on reconciliation, and in fact, perhaps developing a reconciliation policy.
So what, can I ask, sorry, Mayor Halkis, can I ask you what that means? Like, what is a reconciliation policy?
Well, I actually, I would go to the clerk on it, but to me, it's a policy that guides municipality in its attempt to reconcile or to be part of the reconciliation process. Like, we have no guide. So,
Right.
Yeah,
And
we-
I'm
we-
not
we
trying
actually
to
had this-
challenge you. I'm just trying
no,
to
no, but we
define
had this,
how-
we had this discussion at the last meeting, like, what are we trying to do? Like, so that's what we're exploring right now with the committee. So out of that committee, we should be getting some sort of guidance that we can pass on to the municipality as a whole. But the municipality needs an overarching policy to guide it in its interactions in terms of reconciliation. Like, we just had I thought, a really excellent exercise in reconciliation with the flag raising here and the barbecue. But that's a one-off. What other things should we be doing? We should be doing things throughout the organization.
Yeah. So to me.
So we're not going to
it's
solve that
the
tonight.
language.
Pardon me?
No, and I'm not, that's not what I'm asking. And I want to make that clear also, but I guess what I'm looking for is, like, this particular committee, is the motivation reconciliation or reconciliation? Are we looking to work from that place of action and being able to guide those recommendations in a safe way?
Well, I would say both.
Then I think it should reflect such, that there's a doing attached to it, because reconciliation in itself is a word, not an action. So I think that's where I stand on that.
Yeah, I take your point. I mean, to me, it's wordsmithing. we want to be able to advise the municipality on reconciliation and how to go about that. That's an action. So if you want to use the term reconciliation, I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and to me, I apologize, it's not wordsmithing. And again, I'm not trying to challenge you, but I think there's an opportunity here to understand the difference and how Indigenous people see that differently.
But what I'm saying is that's what the committee is going to be doing. We're not doing it here at this table. The committee itself will be exploring that and making recommendations.
I want it reflected in that place again, because I may not be at the table in 2
Yeah, so,
years,
I'm just trying to be efficient here. So my question then is, what input would you like to put to guide the committee to do that?
I think from both places, reconciliation and reconciliation.
Okay, so you want to use the term reconciliation and reconciliation. Anyone object to that? Okay, good. Carry on.
That's all I have.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Anybody else? So, again, I don't want to put any councilors on the spot, but do you have any input on the other two committees? Councilor McTaggart?
Thank you, Your Worship. I said at both the museum and the Sister Kennedy Center Advisory Committee, and I encourage both of those committees to read the policy and respond with any concerns. I understand that nothing came forward. Is that in fact correct?
No, nothing's come forward yet.
Okay. I know that the museum struggles to find people to be on there, but and they're more focused on the museum and as such, not really the policy at this point. But I've encouraged them, and I will encourage them to certainly voice their opinion. At the Sister Kennedy Center, it's a bit of a different animal. It's really run by a lot of volunteers, and volunteers, they want to do things. They do things to help people. They do things to help their community. They do things to make it better for everyone. And I think there's a bit of a concern at the Sister Kennedy Center that they're going to maybe just be a bit hand-tied in terms of being able to do things. And they really want to get in and make a difference. But if they haven't voiced their opinion, I can't really do much more than encourage them to do so. Could I ask a question? At one point, there was wording in there if there was to be an ad hoc committee set up by a town committee that it would have to come to council for approval. I don't see that in there. Has that been removed through you, Chair, to Madam Clerk?
Madam Clerk?
I'm just looking through it. I know through your worship, we did have that conversation last council meeting. And we have kept some wording to that effect within the policy. I'm just looking here.
Could you direct me to where it is, please?
Yeah, for sure. Give me a second. Find the area.
And sort of the background of my question is if the senior center wants to put together a committee to run a dinner or something, or seniors month, or that type of thing, you know, is it going to have to come to council, and what's the turnaround time on an event or item such as that?
Madam Clerk?
So through your worship, so we can certainly look at inputting within their terms of reference that they have the ability to strike those types of small committees. But we would still require to know the names of the individuals. But so long as we make it clear in the terms of reference, we still need to know who the volunteer is, you know, for insurance purposes and all those things. But at least the delegated authority would be there, so there would be like no actual restrictions per se, and it would make things flow quicker for you. But I do believe that I can't point it on the document here before me, but I do believe that we did tweak some of that within the wording. But I'll make a note if that is council's wishes to for sure input something within the terms of reference that, you know, that is something that they they'd like to continue to do for special events in terms of hosting dinners and, those types of things.
Thank you.
Okay, did you have anything else?
No, not at this point.
I guess I'm just thinking out loud. I would like to give those committees a chance for input. I'm wondering, and I've spoken briefly to the clerk about this today, if we just sent them a letter inviting them to, so they have a written record and it could go to the next board meeting. Like, there's no real rush on this. Yes. Manager Young.
Yes, to the chair, this has been on our committee agendas every month.
Okay.
Starting in February 2024.
So they're well aware of
I
it.
believe that they're well aware and have been given ample time for feedback.
Okay. Councilor McTaggart? Oh, Madam Clerk?
Maybe if I can suggest, once we've collected the wishes of council here at the table and we've created some sort of draft, maybe that's the opportunity at that point to share the draft and see how the advisory committee feel about what the new version would look like.
Sure. That seems expeditious. Okay. Councilors, yes, Councilor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. On that note, I might suggest that the members of council on the Sister Betty Kennedy Advisory Committee take that to them to their next meeting to have a full discussion with the councilors on that committee, because I'm sure they're going to have some questions and maybe that could be help to resolve whatever issues you're looking at. So
Sure.
When they do come here, they're more prepared.
Okay. Good suggestion. Councilor McTaggart?
So just for a point of clarification, through you to Madam Clerk, you're going to rework this some more and we'll see another draft? And at that point, we could talk to the committees? Because we have a seniors committee meeting tomorrow at 11, so, but I don't feel I have anything to take to them at this point.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
That is correct. So through your worship, so tonight's request, the council resolution is now, the last council resolution was to receive it as information and discussion. Tonight, what I was asking is to direct administration to bring back some recommendations on role clarity and all those kinds of things. We wanted to make sure that this was council's will and direction to try and clarify some of those things. And then we'll build something within the terms of reference and we bring back a draft at the next council meeting for use to discuss. And so it's a bit of an ongoing process. We're a work in progress.
Councilor McTaggart?
Madam Clerk, would you even be willing to come to a meeting and talk to the board members?
If that is council's wish, we can certainly do that.
Possibility, yeah.
Yeah. And Councilor Bien?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I'm understanding this correctly, it's to clarify the roles of advisory committees and authority, especially the Sister Kennedy one and the museum one, because they have maybe their own source of revenue. They have their own, like, for example, should the museum creator be doing the day-to-day operations or is it the cultural and recreation manager? That's where I can understand where there's some conflict. And I think it's important that we do clear that up.
Yes.
I'm all in favor of
Yes.
that. So I don't have any suggestions of my own right now, but I'd like to hear what administration has to say, because I understand from what I've heard over the last few months, there is some problems trying to define what role does the advisory committee have and how far can they go with their authority in terms of day-to-day operation, directing staff, management of revenue, expenses, donations, et cetera. So I think it's very important that we do get clarification, because I think there's been some loggerheads, if I'm not mistaken, over the past few months over this, and it has to be cleared up as far as I'm concerned. So thank you.
You're exactly right. Do you want to speak to that, Madam Clerk? Or so what I'm suggesting then is Madam Clerk will be coming back with an additional policy, and hopefully that'll be clarified in there. Further questions or comments? I will just suggest if you're having a meeting tomorrow that you could have a discussion tomorrow and get some input. But once this is done, it'll go back to the committees and you can get further input, but, okay. Anybody else? Any other comments? Yes, Councillor Bian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, through you to perhaps Madam Clerk. Personally, I think the way we are selecting committee members is fine. One of the options is to implement a public appointment policy, and it sounds like that's something that you're recommending as part of the the motion. So do you prefer that we do have a public appointment policy rather than what we're doing right now, which is have council appoint the members from all the applications we get each time? Thank you.
Yeah, so through you, Your Worship. So that particular item was subject matter that had been raised by members of the public, that they were worried about concerns about conflict of interest between council members and the volunteers on certain boards. So the recommendation was to maybe look at how we do our appointment process and promote a little bit more of transparency, prevent the biases that people might be perceiving, and decide how we're going to choose a counselor and a volunteer to join these committees to make sure there's no perceived conflicts or biases. So that is essentially, you know, we can certainly look at clarifying it a little bit within this committee bylaw, but I thought maybe having a separate policy on public appointment might make things a little bit clearer and make people more comfortable with the process.
Anything else? Well, thank you for that, everyone. So just so you're reminded that the motion before you, I have struck, and that council direct administration to develop and present a policy governing donations and in-kind support from staff, because we'll have a motion to deal with that in a moment. So on the motion before you then, which has been moved and seconded, all in favor? Okay, and no one is opposed. So do you have a blank? Okay. Well, I used it. Yeah. But it's just going to be the same thing. But let's do it formally. Okay, so we have a new and separate motion that reads that council directs administration to develop and present a policy governing donations and in-kind support from staff. First of all, I want to check with Councillor Olson because this is kind of her baby. Is that sufficient for you? Okay. Can I get a mover and seconder on that? Councillor Firth, Councillor Bernetta? Any discussion on that one? All in favor? It's carried. Okay, that's takes us to the end of item 9. Item 10, community service and division reports. There are no items. Item 11, planning and development division reports. No items. So we're on agenda item 12 now, traffic. So 12.1, put a resolution on the floor that council approval report AR-24-0676 will agree with the recommendation of administration to forego the completion of a detailed traffic study on the First Street West corridor, and that no changes be made to the traffic control devices along the First Street West corridor. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Firth and Councillor Bian. Okay, discussion. Seeing none? Call the question. All in favor? No one's opposed? That's carried. Okay, 12.2, we have an emergency unbudgeted capital request. Put a resolution on the floor that council approval of report AR-24-0685 will agree with the recommendation of administration to approve the emergency unbudgeted capital expenditure for the replacement of the 52 Canadians ice plant controller estimated at $208,000. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Firth, Councillor Behan. Any discussion on this? Yes, Councillor Firth.
Through your worship to Manager Rob, is there anything else that we foresee that we're going to be needing as unplanned expenditures?
It's a good question. Go ahead, Manager Rob.
In relation to 52 Canadians Arena or in general? No, I will say with reasonable assurances. The ice plant controller is kind of the last remaining relic piece in that arena. And so with this work, with the replacement of that controller, everything else will be reasonably new. So there's obviously there's always work to be done. But all the other components of that ice plant, either through the replacement of the compressor, the replacement of the controller, or just work that's happened in the past, will be reasonably new.
Follow up, go ahead.
So just getting back to the summer pilot then a little bit, if we have these big expenditures on equipment and or systems, is there anything that we can be proactive in our approach? Like, I know that these are big ticket items, so we're not just going to have an extra controller or compressor, but will we know a little bit more in advance, or is this kind of like we just react when it goes and figure it out?
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. I had kind of alluded to this earlier when we were talking about summer ice. The two emergency unbudgeted that happened in 52 are similar, but also very different. We had no forewarning that when we opened up the compressor for rebuild, that compressor would have failed in the way that it did. The ice plant controller has been on our radar, and we've been working with some fairly substantial capital infusion for the last 3 years in preparation to do this work. And we were planning to do it next summer. So we knew that this was a failing piece. However, at the time, it wasn't just, let's get a new controller and put it in. There's a whole bunch of other work that had to happen in the background to ready us for doing this. Thankfully, we finished that work this summer. Unfortunately, the ice plant controller decided that it also wasn't going to restart for another ice season. So it's not an unforeseen emergency expenditure. When we're expending it, yes, that was unforeseen, but it's very different than the compressor that we didn't have any indications prior to opening it up that there had been a failure.
Councillor Banana, did I see?
Yes. I was just looking in my emails because I know I sent this grant application to someone else. But there is currently a community recreation fund open for application, and I believe it's 100% of cost. So I don't know if it's something we've looked into. I think it closes actually on Thursday. So, and of course, I didn't look in far enough to see if it was available to, people if you've already done the work. So that may also be a caveat, but I don't know if it's something that you're aware of in terms of grant programs.
Manager Rob?
Yeah, that was a grant that Manager Young and I had looked at. I did complete an application to the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund for this work, and I did find out today that we have passed stage 1 of that grant application. It's not 100% funded, it's 75% funded, but it is still some funding.
I have a question just for clarification, Manager Rob. So in reading your report, like, it's an old ice plant and there are lots of residual relic elderly pieces to it. Are those going to all be cleared up so that they don't fail in the future? Will that be part of this whole new controller?
Thank you, through the chair. Short answer is yes. Obviously, the controller itself is very old and has been added onto and spliced into and drilled into and all sorts of things. However, part of that work involves the replacement of all of the motors that run the plant. And the compressor that we did this summer, that was the old compressor, circa, no one can really tell me, but I want to say like 1975-ish. There is one of the main electric motors that is also circa 1975-ish. That is, one of the last big relic pieces, and that will also be replaced through this work.
So we will be replacing those? Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, calling the question on this one then. All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. Okay, 12.3. Put a recommendation on the floor that reads that Council Approval Report AR-24-0684 will agree with the recommendation of administration to amend Bylaw 21-14, the Traffic Control Bylaw, to formalize the stop signs added on Keating Avenue at First Street West and Erin Crescent at Caitlin Drive. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Firth and Councillor McTaggart. Comments or discussion? Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess my simple question is, why are we putting stop signs on there and Crescent at both the east and west end of the Caitlin Avenue?
Manager Rob.
Thank you, through the chair. So we have to have some sort of traffic control at the intersecting streets. Historically, through the town, it's been stop signs as opposed to a yield or something else. And the initial contemplation for that development was to have a stop on both ends with through traffic on Caitlin Drive, as opposed to stopping on Caitlin Drive and through coming out of Erin Crescent.
Further questions? Seeing none, calling the question. All in favor? It's carried. No one is opposed. .4. Recommendation reads that Council approve report number AR-24-0683 and that the following recommended motion of support be brought forward at the next Council meeting for final approval, being that Council pass for application to the 2025-2026 Connecting Links program for the redesign of Central Avenue intersection with 3rd Street West, 2nd Street East, and 4th Street West to a roundabout intersection design which will state: 1, Council's support of the project identified in the application. 2, confirmation that capital funding is available for the municipal contribution component. And 3, indication that if the application is successful, the municipality will proceed with the project in accordance with timelines specified in the application. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor McTaggart, Councillor Bernetta. Okay, questions or comments? Councillor Bernetta.
Very happy to see this go forward. So just for clarification, today we're just saying that we'll be approving the motion next, Council? I wasn't sure why we needed to do it in 2 steps.
The reason was this is the first time that we've really discussed, I think, in public a roundabout. And so we want to make sure the public is aware of it and they have some chance, if they so wish, to contact their councillors and give them some input. So this won't be finalized till the next meeting. Any further discussions? Yes, Councillor Mackey.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess my first question is if we were to replace all the traffic lights and everything into current functioning units with all of the crosswalk apparatus that you're suggesting, how much does all that cost us?
Manager Rob.
Actually, that's a good question. To properly reconfigure that intersection with proper traffic signals, pedestrian signals, push buttons, et cetera, all the things that it needs to have, we would be looking at basically reconstructing the entire intersection. All of the underground cabling would have to be replaced. Conduits, islands would have to move, lanes would have to move, et cetera, I mean, it's a substantial undertaking. Either way that we look at this, there's no doubt about that. I have not gone through the exercise at this point of costing that out. If we were to do that, the signals, there would be a heavy design component in that as well. So really, we have two avenues we can take. We can go down the avenue of redesigning it for replacing the signals, or redesigning it to something with a focus on improving traffic flow.
Follow up?
So my question is still, how much would that cost? I'm not looking for a ballpark is all I'm looking for. Is it 100,000? Is it 500,000? Roughly, where would we be if we decided to just put lights back there and not do the roundabout?
Go ahead, Manager Rob.
I would say we'd be in the neighborhood of $750 to $1 million.
Okay. Go ahead.
So then if we do the roundabout, and obviously that's a substantial project, but it is funded
90%.
90%. Well, 10% to us, 700,000 would equate to 700 million. Are we anywhere near $7 million to do that roundabout?
Manager Rob.
Substantially less.
So just on that, the signal work would also be potentially eligible for 90% Connecting Link funding. At this point in time, I don't have a good cost estimate on a roundabout, because there's a ton of options that we can look at with that in terms of how ornate we want to get with the center island of it. Personally, I think there's a great opportunity to do some outreach and do something really nice there, just given its location in town and the space that we have available to us. So there's a lot of unknown that's going to come through the design in terms of what construction cost of a roundabout is going to be. I'm anticipating it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 to $2 million to go with the roundabout option.
Thank you, Manager Rob. You good?
Yes.
Okay. Mandy, Councilor Olson, did you have your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair to Manager Rob. It's been a while since I looked at a redesign project, but I know one of the priorities for this was like mitigating congestion. But we already have congestion going eastbound, especially like hitting Mowat then Portage. In the redesign, will they be taking into consideration and giving us recommendations, say extending the green lights on, eastbound traffic or things like that? Because my fear is that we introduce the roundabout and then everybody's getting stuck at Mowat, and I could see somebody sitting in the roundabout not wanting to give up their space in line and impeding on traffic trying to move, especially eastbound. Like I have that struggle every morning. So I can't remember though in a redesign if they look at those sorts of things or if that's something that we have to take on separately.
Manager Rob.
So through the chair, thank you. We can expand the scope to, a full-on, municipal-wide traffic study if we want. We haven't done enough controller replacements yet on particularly the 2nd Street corridor to be able to actually stage those signals. And so that's one of the stumbling blocks that we come into. So if we are able to change the remaining 3 traffic signal controllers within that stretch, we would be able to stage those traffic signals and help with traffic flow outside of this particular project. But because we have a mix of old and new, for a number of technical reasons, we can't properly stage those lights.
Follow up?
Sorry, I'm not understanding what you're saying. So do those lights have to be replaced in theory? If this redesign looks great, we'll have to replace the lights at Mowat and Portage most likely?
Go ahead.
So through the chair, we've already done the Portage lights. Mowat Avenue, Crow Avenue, and Armit Avenue need to get replaced so that we can then basically link the lights so that if you go through the roundabout and you're driving at 50 kilometers an hour, the posted speed limit, and you hit one green light, you will hit every single green light as long as you continue at the posted speed limit. The only one that we've done is Portage Avenue. So the other 3 intersections are all old technology and cannot synchronize with the new technology or themselves independently of that as well. So if we build a roundabout and we get traffic flowing through Central Avenue really well, then we look at, and we go through the process of replacing at Mowat Avenue, Armit Avenue, and Crow Avenue, then we can index all of those lights along that entire corridor so that as you're coming through the roundabout, right, you're hitting that first green light or maybe the first red light and then making your way down the entire corridor. And then at that point, then we can start looking at what we need for the signal timing duration. How long of a green do we need? How long of an amber? How long of a red? To make sure that that corridor flows well.
Go ahead. Yep.
So are you recommending that we move ahead with this redesign project and then revisit that later? Or would that be purposeful to put into this particular project? Because I see and anticipate a big cost coming after a big cost has already come. So I'm like, does it make sense to try to get it in one shot? Then we can project, for say 2027 in capital to do it together or in a 3-stage approach?
Go ahead.
So what we're talking about here is a connecting link job. 2nd Street is not a connecting link highway.
So it wouldn't qualify.
So it doesn't qualify. The traffic controllers at Mowat Avenue, Armit Avenue, and Crow Avenue should have been replaced 10 years ago. And what I can say to that is stay tuned to Capital 2025.
Councilor McTaggart?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Rob. From U.S. Memorial Day weekend through till September, we're often experience long lineups of U.S. guests returning home. Do you feel a roundabout can handle that lineup and successfully move other traffic?
Go ahead.
Thank you through the chair. This is one of the components of the design that in Councillor Mackey's comments, I don't really know a good cost estimate going forward because there's a ton of options. There's options that we can look at, and that is one of the key components. And the couple of things that we have going for us in this particular location with this particular type of intersection design is space. We as a municipality own a lot of the land around this intersection. It's already a very large intersection. And so we really have an opportunity to do some very convenient things with lanes, lane widths, lane locations to keep the flow of traffic happening without impact by or to the lineup to the bridge. We all know that there's a lineup that goes to the bridge through most of the summer. So we can keep that in mind and plan for that through the design component.
Thank you. I've just come off a road trip and I've driven through a lot of traffic circles and they really keep traffic flowing. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Councillor Mackey?
I just had the thought of the pumping station there, so this roundabout wouldn't expand outwards towards that station at Central.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, really that on the northeast side, I guess that's really our only design constraint is the Central Avenue lift station that's right there. it is quite north of the intersection, so it still does afford us a fairly substantial piece of property to work with.
All good questions. Anything else? Yeah, I want to echo Councillor McTaggart's reports. I find roundabouts very efficient at moving traffic along if they're set up and designed properly. So calling the question then, all in favor? That's carried. Anyone opposed? Okay. Okay, 12.5. Recommendation reads that Council approval of report AR-24-0664 will agree with the recommendation of administration to make no changes to the parking on Victoria Avenue south of Nelson Street east of Victoria Avenue, but direct administration to bring a cost estimate forward to the 2025 capital budget deliberations for the addition of a sidewalk along Nelson Street from Victoria Avenue to the municipal parking lot. Can I get a mover and seconder on that, please? Councillor Bernetta, Councillor Firth. Discussion. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I think it's Manager Rob. A couple of things. It says here in the recommendation that there be no changes to the parking on Victoria Avenue south of Nelson Street east of Victoria Avenue, even though one of the recommendations is to add 3 spots east of this on Nelson, east of the. So is there am I missing something there, or should that be part of the change?
Go ahead. That's an option.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Mr. Mayor, 100% correct. That is an option. It's not my recommendation, but it is an option on the floor.
Councillor Behan.
Follow up. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to just more a comment than anything. When we had the celebration dinner for Les Baker and Cynthia Woodland, I purposely parked at that municipal lot behind the church. And I think if we expect seniors to use that lot to access the Sister Kennedy said there should be a sidewalk there. So I'd be certainly in favor of putting that through to the 2025 budget process. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Mackey.
Well, a couple points. To the sidewalk issue, I'm wondering how much that would cost versus how much would it cost us to put parking to the south end of the Sister Kennedy building and alleviate all of that problem. Second, I went many times to go watch trucks make the turn there. And I went today specifically because of the document here. If you look at page 5, it's showing the drawing on it. And I'm going to suggest that whoever designed this has never sat in a pulp truck. They don't make a turn like that. They never made a turn, and all the trucks I've seen make that turn off of Nelson, a right turn to go south on Victoria. Nor did any of them make a left-hand turn off of Victoria to go west on Nelson. And if you go out and you watch trucks in the community when they're making those turns, certainly at Central Avenue and 3rd West, when they're in the outside lane making that left turn onto the 4-laners and the outside lane, what they do is go straight out as far into the intersection and almost turn that tractor into a 90-degree turn. And they make that right-hand turn to go southbound on Victoria. And today there were 6-7 feet of between the curb and the back tires of the rig that made that turn. And I'm going to suggest that if two trucks meet going in opposite directions, get to that intersection, one's going to stop and allow the other one to go before the second one goes. That's just etiquette with truckers, I suspect. Not maybe counting the cross-Canada ones that have issues. But the guys that make these turns, all of the ones that I saw made those turns without any issues. And so putting parking on the east side of Victoria and leaving, as Councillor McTaggart had suggested previous meetings, a certain length back from the intersection to afford the trucker to swerve a bit to the right as he gets to the intersection, and then go deep into the intersection and make his left-hand turn to go west on Nelson. You make that turn without any issues, and they made those with vehicles stopped right at the stop line on Nelson facing east. So I don't accept this as this diagram as gospel. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? I just do want to remind, I will add one. I went to look at trucks too, and when I watched the trucks turn, I found that they needed the whole space. There were some pretty wide swinging trucks there. Don't forget, there is an option of putting 3 parking spaces in front of the Sister Kennedy Center there. Councillor McTaggart?
Thank you, Your Worship, but if I read that option, it's 3 spots that are already there and would still be affected by calendar parking.
I'll go to the CAO to speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. My apologies. That could have been clarified to say this would be 3 permanent spots, so it wouldn't be affected by calendar parking because you don't know what day calendar parking is going to fall on because it switches back and forth for when it would be used. This would be 3 spots that would circumvent the calendar parking that would be dedicated strictly there throughout the year. It's not a perfect solution, but it adds 3 primary spots on the days where calendar parking wouldn't allow it to serve as, if you want to kind of use the concept of a compromise to have that year round. So again, that could have been clarified a little bit better, but these would be permanent. And in discussions, Manager Rob and myself spent the afternoon there kind of discussing this. This kind of works with the previous discussion of council of, we did an exercise where it was open, throughout the whole street where you could park there. Well, if we just do the 3, primary spots, there's little effect, or you're going to get less of the complaints that you previously had about having permanent parking on the, south side of it. But if it's just 3 spots, it really affects only 2 driveways backing up. They still have visibility issues from the north side of parking, and the south side doesn't really have any impact. So I don't know if I'm really clarifying that well, but it's year-round 3 spots without allowing permanent parking on the south side for the whole street.
Thank you for that. Councillor McTaggart, any follow-up, or are you good with that?
I think Councillor Mackey has stated the case fairly well.
Okay. Yes.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, then to maybe Mr. CEO. I'm just reading the report here. It said the additional spots would also only add parking on even days. On even days in accordance with the calendar parking. So that shouldn't be in that report, that line.
Yeah, I may go to Manager Rob for that clarity.
So right now, the 3 spots that we're discussing are available on odd days. They would be available. There would only be 3 additional spots on even days when you're not allowed to park on that side of the road. So to Mr. CAO's point, they would be available all days, but they're already available half of the days as it is.
Okay, I understand what it reads now. Okay, thank you.
Any further comments or discussion? So I just wanted to bring that to council's attention, that there are a possibility of getting those 3 spots on an extra day if that's your wish, but we would have to make an amendment if you want that. So I'm going to call the question then. On the motion that's before you, all in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Okay. That brings us to item 13, bylaws. We only have one tonight. Recommendation reads that bylaw 67-24 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with GFL Environmental Incorporated re RFT 2024-OF-15 for residential garbage and recycle curbside pickup and garbage bin supply be introduced and read and finally passed, signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and become law forthwith. Can I get a mover and seconder, please? Councillor Firth, Councillor Bien. Any discussion on this? All in favor? That's carried. No one was opposed. Oh, I'm sorry. One opposed. Still carried. Item 14, notice of motion. There are none. Item 15, no closed session this evening. That brings us to item 17, which is the confirmatory bylaw. Recommendation reads that bylaw 68-24 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Fort Francis be introduced, read, and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the corporate seal, and become law forthwith. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Firth, Councillor Bernetta. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. No one is opposed. And finally, that having reached the hour of 7:27, this meeting of the Council of the Town of Fort Francis be now closed. All in favor? Oh, mover and seconder, Councillor McTaggart. I'm losing it here. Councillor Mackey. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Council.